Hello and welcome to another session of Flutter Original. And today I'm very excited because we're going to talk about some advanced stuff. And in particular, we're going to talk about design pattern. Together with me, I have the author of Design Pattern for Flutter article, a series of articles that covers all the design patterns in Flutter. And I'm so happy that we can pair program together and he will show me how I can actually use some of these design patterns in a Flutter application or one of my applications that I created recently. So, hello, Mangirdas. How is it going?
Hi, Majid. I'm good. How are you?
Do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are, what you did, and everything?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mangirdas. I am Flutter and Dart GDE from Lithuania. Currently working as a mobile tech lead at Billow, at a local startup there. And yeah, we have a very interesting topic today, and I was very happy when Majid offered this because that's something new in my experience as well to live code and talk about these design patterns. Since I spent quite a lot of time on those, I think everything started in 2018 when I just started putting my steps into the Flutter world, and I just wanted to, I know, give something back to the community, and just started writing on Medium, and then I just wondered about the about an interesting topic, which could be useful for the others, and which would be like a little bit more advanced than just, I don't know, implementing UI or doing design challenges, which are also great. But I wanted to dive deeper into the architecture of the app, let's say. So I chose the design patterns. I was, I guess the first interaction with those was at the university, a little bit earlier than 2018. And yeah, and I thought that, okay, there would be a lot of content and there would be a lot to learn and on the way, to improve in Flutter and in writing in general. And as a result, like 2 years later, now the Flutter Design Patterns series is pretty much done. It contains 23 different design patterns originally described in the Gang of Four book, design patterns of object in object-oriented programming. I don't know the exact name, but we could post the link later for this book, because it's like, I know, one of the iconic books in object-oriented programming, I would say. And yeah, and as you mentioned, Majid, that I covered all of the Flutter design patterns. That's of course not true. Even in the book, there are not all the design patterns are described. A lot of new appeared on the way, so we'll see. Maybe that's some place for the extra
Cool.
articles in the series. Who knows?
That's cool. So definitely we will put the link in the show notes or in the comment below or in the description of the video. So don't worry about it. You will definitely get the links to all the articles. Before we start, so for those who are probably are not very familiar with design pattern, or for beginners. So if you want to just like a few words, tell me first of all, what is this design pattern stuff?
Sure. That I have no like single answer to this, and every time I am asked about this, I provide a different answer, and I think all of them works in the way. Um, so first of all, it's a design pattern, but when we mention design, we shouldn't consider UI or user interface, because design patterns are not about that. Design patterns are more about the app architecture, about the code structure, about the code reusability, maintainability, and all of these nice features that comes together with those design patterns. So basically, so that's the design part. When we define the structure or the shape of our code. So that's the design, of our code. And then there's a pattern part. So pattern is basically design patterns. They provide us reusable components, reusable ideas, the, I would say, blueprints for our code. And when we get into a specific problem, and when we, I know, trying to implement something new or something, just something on top of our existing code, so these patterns just provide us the way, and most of the cases the right way, how we should structure our code to keep it maintainable, testable, to keep it reusable, and not break our existing code, I would say. So this is the pattern part. So design patterns is basically about the code quality, about code reusability, and all of those nice features that comes along together with that.
All right. So then it's mostly, so when we're talking about design patterns, we're talking about just code, which is uh, it's a single let's say it's one unit of our application. We're talking about like coding and like programming and stuff like that. We're not talking about like the whole architecture of
No,
the
no, no.
app,
So, so,
right?
so that's yeah. So that's the beauty about this pattern. So there, as I mentioned, I covered like in the book there I described 23 of those. So it means that we could use either all of those in our code, like in separate code places could have, I know, one code places uses two patterns, one uses none,
Yes.
and the other uses only one, but which is useful. So they are scattered around, but as a result, eventually you get this, a single structure that just communicates quite nice together. So
Yes,
yeah.
sure. I'm pretty sure actually most of our audiences and Flutter programmer and Dart programmer probably at some point they have faced some kind of the design pattern in their application, and probably they're not aware of that.
Oh, that's for
So,
sure. That's for sure. I
right?
mean,
Of course.
yeah, exactly. So even when we look fundamentally at Flutter and how the slang and everything is a widget, and behind this there's actually a design pattern that is used and that encapsulates all of that stuff. So yeah, so without even understanding what design patterns are, you are just using those while coding. So for instance, there's a design pattern which is called composite, which is basically you are using with in Flutter case you're using widgets that contain other widgets inside of them, but all of them are like inheriting the same interface or the same abstract class, I would say, because there's no interfaces in Dart, right? So and everything is a widget. So basically that's fundamentally a composite design pattern under the hood, but we are just using it as a part of Flutter framework, and it just looks normal to us. But actually, the ideas, fundamentally comes from these design patterns. So that's the beauty of those. You can use those, but you cannot even, I know you're not aware of those that they exist, but they help you on the way. So yeah, so that's the
Perfect.
good part. Yeah.
And back to my question, like the last part of my questions were about was about
The most popular ones,
the most popular or the most not popular, I mean the
but
most
most used or
used
useful. Hmm.
useful, I mean that you've seen before even writing your Flutter code, let's say in Flutter code base, or in a Flutter project. Like probably there are some patterns that already Flutter team or Flutter developer in Google has used, right? So which
Yeah, I
one can
think
you
so.
recognize?
So, actually, one is as a part of a Dart programming language is Singelton, because without even understanding that, when you are using factory constructor on Dart class, it's basically a singleton. It does exactly the same. It just creates a single instance which is reusable later. So
That's correct.
I mean, Flat. It's we are not even talking about Flutter. We are just talking about the programming language Dart. But under the hood,
Sure.
there's a singleton there. Of course, there's like, even though this pattern is not included in the original book, but dependency injection, I think that's when you're going deeper into the code, you'll see that you pass some references of your services, of your, I don't know, adapters, other classes, using constructors, which is fundamentally dependency injection, because you are injecting this class instead of creating an instance inside another class. So
Perfect.
even, yeah, this is very popular. We talked about composites. You could see some decorators out there from place to place. Um, Repository pattern, that's also not included in the book, but especially when you're getting in the state management world, the repository pattern is very fundamental, how to structure your code to make your services more testable and make it like it becomes easier to test your state management when you can just mock the services and that's it. And you could just test those, I don't know, blocks or providers or whatever you're using in your app like individually. So that also helps. And yeah, factories are very popular. Like when you need, based on something platform specific, you need to get a specific widget, and factories are very
Cool.
popular. At least very small factories, scattered around. So there are a lot of those. Well, when you think more about that.
Cool. So, but okay, let's just move on and go to the pair programming session, and let's just write something together because stop talking about theory and just let's show
Exactly.
what are these design patterns and how can I use these design patterns in my application. So let's go to our VS Code where both of us can write code and okay.
Can I still
All right.
write?
So
Oh, I can. That's nice. Cool.
all right. So now we are in our application. So this is an application, my famous coffee app, which is not, I'm not running that right now. It's okay because we're just going to go through the code and we don't care actually if the application runs, how it looks or not. So we're going
Mm-hmm.
to talk about the code part of it. So this application, whether it's written bad or good, this is what it is. And I want to ask you to help me to find out if we can find some design pattern here, or you can maybe tell me how I can use some of the design patterns that you know to improve the quality of my code and the structure of my code in this application.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to actually give me some tip, you don't know this code base. This is the first time you're in this code base,
Yep,
right? For
exactly.
sure. And
Yep.
I can introduce you this code base very, very shortly.
Cool.
So as always, we're gonna have a main function where everything runs over there. We're gonna have some widgets, the shared one. We will have some services here and perhaps this is pretty familiar to you. This is like a singleton
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Dart, and we're gonna have like screens here to define our screens and some models for sure, and a couple of helpers. So it's a very simple app, just few screens, and it's as you can see, it does not have much code.
Mm-hmm.
But then doesn't matter. It's okay. We will probably find out some pattern here, or you can tell me the most used patterns that you have seen, and then tell me how I can actually implemented here or for what purposes. For example,
Cool.
this
Okay.
app is simple, but maybe you can guide me. If the app grows it scales, then I
Mm-hmm.
know that, oh, for example, I have a factory pattern, so maybe I should use it for that instead of you know something else.
Cool.
So
Okay.
let's get
So
started.
yeah, the first thing that popped to my head when seeing services, are you pulling any data from the API, let's say, or I don't know, any data source? Maybe you're
Yes.
reading that from JSON, whatever.
Yes, I do. And there is on one of these services, for example, here is one of them. So you see that we're calling an HTTP, for example,
Mm-hmm.
request, and then we're just deserializing decoding the JSON, and and returning the Dart object. So as you can see here,
Yep.
this is one of those examples.
Mm-hmm. So since we have an HTTP call there, we can introduce the adapter pattern. And the reason for that is, okay, so what is adapter pattern, right? So basically, you define an interface, and instead of creating like a single, how to say that, like a single version of your data source, you just abstract it using interface, and then
Sure.
later on, by using this abstraction, uh, it's easier to maintain your code, it's easier to test it. And for instance, if you change your data source, let's say now you're pulling this data from HTTP, but maybe for local testing, I know you have no internet connection, so you just want to make things faster because you can just read data locally from, let's say, JSON file, right? So you
Yes.
can implement two versions of these adapters: one to read data from I know API or any other internet data source, let's say, and the other for local one. And then during the even during the startup, you could switch between those, or you can just select the specific one. So yeah, that's quite a useful one, and
Good.
that could
Okay.
even make sense there. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, sure. So let's do that. Let's do that. So then, how can I create an adapter pattern here? Or should I just start with a new file here? Like let's call it something adapter, or should I
so
create a folder? What do you suggest?
yeah, so uh, I think we are okay being at the services, but we just need to create, let's say, a Dart file over there inside services, and
Okay.
that would be our interface or our abstract class as it is in Dart. So that's basically interface for pulling data. I don't know.
Okay. I
Uh,
can call it data source, for example,
sure.
or data source Dart. Okay. And then that's
Cool.
going to be like an abstract
Abstract
data source.
class. Yep. Abstract class and then the data source. Yeah.
Here we go.
Cool. So again, since Dart does not have an like keyword of interface, we're using abstract classes for that.
Yes,
So
sure.
that's good. And now we should define an abstract method inside the class that basically uh, does the job. So I think we had a parameter over there, which is access token, right?
Yeah, I did have this function. So should
Mm-hmm.
I just somehow like copy this here, for
You can
example?
copy only the header of that, because since we are creating
Yeah,
the
I mean,
abstract method, we do not have an implementation
exactly.
of that. So yeah, that should work.
So, and
And
here is,
maybe delete that async part, just and uh, put the semicolon at the end and delete those curly braces as well.
yeah,
And yep, and that's our abstract method.
good. So
And
this is our abstract method.
mhm,
That's very good.
so now there are two ways how developers structure their code, and I saw two of those um, patterns, let's say, in the code. So one of those is creating a separate like folder and define the specific implementations of this data source, or you could just specify the implementations in the same file. So just to
Yeah,
keep the
let's
amount
keep
of
it
files
simple for
same.
now. Yeah,
For
let's keep
sure.
it simple for now. Um,
Yeah.
so then
So
I should
so
just create like
class
data
and
source
so
like like this.
so since we have two implementations, you could be more specific with that. So for instance, one would be API data source implementation, or just, I know, API
Okay.
data source, and this should implement the data source abstract class.
Yeah. And
And
then
now
for
we
sure
see
I need
this.
to. Okay.
uh, yep, we are overriding or just implementing the method provided in the data source. And
Sure.
there we so you see now the exception would be thrown because we have no implementation over there. So we'll put the implementation later on, I think. And
Yeah.
now we can create another class, or just copy paste it and change the name, because everything should should stay the same there.
Yeah.
Instead of API, that could be, I don't know, local data source, let's say. Why
Yeah.
not? So cool. So basically, yeah, we created an interface, right? We created the abstract method over there, and now we have two specific implementations of this. Which
Yes.
one of this is API data source and the one is local data source. So now let's say, uh, since we have the implementation that used HTTPS, right? So we can
Yes.
just paste the whole implementation in our first class because
You mean
it
from
should,
here
yep, it should stay the
to
same.
here?
Cool. So yeah, I think we would need to,
Then I need to import my
yeah,
HTTP.
we need to import some more things over
And
there.
this is
Also
actually a
marking this
sync,
as a sync.
and this is
And
going to import from. All right, then it's done.
for this, yeah, it seems so. Um, actually, where are you creating the HTTP client? Oh, it's HTTP get.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's HTTP GET, so I don't
okay,
create that client.
okay. Because sometimes, let's say, also another benefit of that, um, when let's say you are creating a single HTTP client just to uh, save a little bit of memory, and you could
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
sure.
reuse that client, or maybe you create a single client. For instance, that's very popular when you're using the DO package, and then let's say you configure that with specific headers, specific authorization tokens, and so on. So you want to reuse this the same client everywhere, just because you don't need to repeat your code, and that's
Sure.
um, yeah, that's the
That's
dry
correct.
principle, right? So
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this
sure.
case, if you're using like HTTP over there, so this data source would be quite a good place to create this client, because if that's the single place where you pull the data from API, so you could create this specific API over there, and yeah, and that's it, and use it. And the let's say the local data store, this specific class, this implementation wouldn't even care what you're doing in that class, so you could specify only what you need in that class. So that's a little bit separation of concerns among classes, and that also helps while testing and maintaining the code. So yeah, so
Yes,
that's
sure.
just a tip.
Right.
Cool. And for local
So,
data source, so I don't know if we would implement this, but the main idea, let's say, there would be like, if we had a data source like JSON file in our assets, we could just read this file, and then we can just parse it from JSON or whatever format is provided,
yeah,
right?
sure.
And just return the same authenticated user. So that could be useful for local testing.
Okay. All right,
Cool.
then.
Then the
So,
question is how to use that, because now we just created, but we are not using this anywhere in our code.
yeah. Well, technically, I can I just come back to the same method here,
Yep.
and where was it here, and then just
Mm-hmm.
like remove everything,
That's true.
and
That's doable.
and perhaps what I can do, well, it might not be very optimal, but then what I can do at the moment, maybe I can create like an instance of this data source.
Yeah. So uh, now we can come to this dead end over there, because we are creating the
Sure.
specific instance what we need. So the better approach in general would be like passing this instance as a
As an
parameter.
dependency injection.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right.
exactly, as using the dependency injection, another pattern on top of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this case, since we know that this authentication service is just using API data source, so we can do that. Sure, that would work.
Yeah, sure. At the moment, I mean, there is only one use case for that, which is
Mm-hmm.
this one. But for our actually our viewers. So then, what we want to do, what we have to do then, I do have a singleton here. So
Yep. So
um,
when creating this singleton instance, we could
I
create
can
this
define it
service as
here,
well.
right? So in
Yep.
the
Yep.
like
Yep.
body. So I mean that would be probably a better approach anyway. So then we can just
Exactly.
move this to here, and and this is going to import this, and that's going to be our API data source.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
let's define our okay. And then now I can actually get rid of
Actually,
this dependency.
one thing about there, so you define the the type for this specific implementation as API data source, but there you could use just our interface, which
Abstraction.
is yeah
Yeah,
our
yeah.
data
You're
source.
right. You're right.
So that would be the correct solution over there. So now when we pass this using the constructor, we could pass either the API data source or local data source. So that's the real dependency injection used in our code.
Okay. So now actually I refactored
Hmm.
this and then it just returned
And you can even
calling.
remove that async over there.
Yes. Now
Yep,
actually it makes it way simpler compared to the previous implementation. And there is one good thing here is that so my singleton auth service is not dependent on the HTTP anymore, and
that's
it's
true
just
because we
dependent
moved that
on
route.
it's
Yep.
dependent on the API data source where
Hmm.
I can mock it and stop it and do it like stuff like that, so it's easier for testing later, right?
Yep, because we have less
Okay,
dependencies over there, and we have less things to mock when
perfect.
testing the whole service. That helps. That helps
Okay,
eventually.
so then let's wrap up here. So I did have one singleton already service here. So let's say what singleton is. Do you want to explain what singleton is? Another design,
By
another pattern.
definition, uh, I think whoever watched the very old movie Highlander would know the definition because there could be the only one. So the singleton is basically a class, I would say, or just I know object instance that is a sole instance, and it would remain the same across the whole life cycle of the app. Meaning, once you create this instance, you won't be able to replace it. There would be like only single source of true, and that's basically a good thing or a bad thing, because um, in the book it's implemented as a design pattern, but later on when you like read more material on the internet, you could find that this is actually an anti-pattern because of being the single instance, and that means that you cannot really uh, change dependencies later on. You cannot really test it that much of this singleton instance, and so on. So if you are using this for the right purpose, everything is cool and everything is good. But in some cases you could uh, not avoid it, but maybe limit yourself of making every single class in like singletons. So just using it whatever is actually needed.
Okay, perfect. So then the another pattern that we designed here or we coded here was the adapter
Mm-hmm.
pattern. Is adapter similar to repository pattern? Are they same or there are differences?
Uh, Actually, it has a little bit of difference. So in this case, it's more of a repository pattern, but also it works as an adapter. So the purpose of adapter is basically making like two incompatible classes compatible.
I
And
see.
now I'm trying to how to explain this. So basically, exactly the same in repository and adapter pattern. We define the same interface and we define the abstract method over there. Uh, so let's say from hmm, I'm just thinking how to refactor this to make a point over there. Uh, so let's say, can I write a code there?
Yes.
Cool. So how to make it the actual adapter pattern? So let's say that this class does not implement the interface we defined there, but we know that we need to somehow pull the information for there. And let's say that this specific class returns has a different return type that we need in our app. So that could be that was just out user. I think that does not exist, but let's keep it there. So let's say that we cannot really access this function directly, because in our app we need authentic out zero user, right, and not the out user. So what we can do when we are creating the instance of our class, let's say there we have final, and we have like data source. I don't know if I can do that. Okay, maybe I'll just use the constructor injection over there. So we can pass this using our constructor, right? So this data source. So let's say inside this method, when we actually need to pull this data, so first of all, we pull this user data from the local data source. So user data, and we are using this. Oh my, Lithuanian keyboard is hell. Cool. So we are using this data source, and we should see this get user details method. But we cannot return this user data over there because the return time is different over there, right? So
Yes, right.
technically, there we could do like in the real world scenarios, we would do some parsing over there to just transfer, not transfer, but maybe remap one
Okay,
properties of one
so
object to the other, and then we would return this parsed or remapped object. And what we win from this case, so initially we didn't really know the interface of that, and we are not using this interface inside our app, but now we made those this incompatible class compatible using the adapter pattern. And
I see.
there are similarities to the repository pattern. Actually, they are could be implemented in the exactly same way, but they fundamentally have a little bit different meaning. So sometimes you could see that they are used interchangeably, like with
I
each other.
see.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool to know. All right. So let's now let's keep this actually. I wanna revert everything.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Because maybe later we can post this. Okay, I'm not able to control Z anymore, but that's fine. What I can do, I can just copy.
Oh, maybe I could. Okay,
That's okay. I mean
we just need
that
to
doesn't matter.
replace this, and
That's
it
it
should
done.
work now.
Okay, so
Cool.
now we're talking about three design pattern by now. So we know a little bit about repository right now. We know service singleton and adapter.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on and implement maybe a couple of others.
Cool.
What else can I do? For example,
We can try.
um,
Okay, you are the host. You can choose whatever I want. I have a
well,
single offer
you
as
can
well.
yeah, you can tell me which one is the most used one. Maybe we can find that pattern in my application right now.
Whew. Are you using any factories? Like, is your app adaptable to the platform code? You are using different buttons on
Uh-huh.
iOS and Android or something like that?
Yeah, I do not have it, but I think it's a very common thing for Flutter
Mm-hmm.
application.
Exactly.
Let's
Since
actually
we're
do that.
Yeah,
Should
since
I
we're
create another service or like maybe another
no,
file? Or what
that
should I do?
that's not a service. So um, so we want okay, why we need this is basically the purpose of Flutter, and why we are using that is it's cross-platform, and sometimes you need for your UI to look different on each platforms. Of course, initially there was only Android, iOS, but later on, look, the web appears Linux, macOS, so means that you need to represent the same thing in 5 or 6 different forms sometimes, like showing the different buttons and how they look like, right? So for that we could use two different ways of the factory pattern. Actually, there is one called factory method, and one is called abstract factory. So I don't know whether so maybe that's a question to you. Should we cover only a single like component, like only a single widget, or we will cover like multiple ones, like
Uh,
widget, maybe
let's
icon,
imagine
maybe.
we will cover multiple widgets. because
Okay,
that's quite
so
common.
for that we would use the abstract factory then, because
Sure.
the difference between factory method and abstract factory, basically it's the amount of components you create, because abstract factory is the purpose of it is to create a family of related objects. So let's say in the UI you have buttons, icons, you have modal views, you have other UI specific elements that could look different on different platforms, right? So for that, the abstract factory is a better choice, because if using
Cool.
abstract factory method, eventually would create a lot of, and I cannot express this enough, like lots and lots of different classes just to create a single widget. So
Yeah,
that's not
sure.
a good way to go. Cool. So actually, under widgets, we you can create a dedicated folder, create a like called factory. Why not? Or widgets factory, or just factory. That would work.
Yeah.
Cool. So the first thing we would need to do, it's actually very similar what we already did. Is basically creating a base interface for our specific factories. So you could call that
Should I call it
widget factory.
flat widget factory?
Yeah, just widget factory. That could work, or platform widget factory. I don't know. I'm just a fan of keeping uh, less
Yeah, that's
characters in the naming as possible.
naming is difficult, right? We know that.
Y-
That's
yeah,
fine. Let's move
and
on.
naming and concurrency, like the two devils in programming. Cool. So yes, abstract class again, widget
Okay,
factory.
so all right.
Yep, and there we can define um like different methods to create our widgets, right? So one could be like the return type of each of these methods is widget, because we're creating widgets, and this widgets would be of the same type, even though we are creating iOS or Android. They're still widget, right? So the return
Yes.
time should be widget over there, and the method itself is like, I don't know, create button, create.
Yeah, let's go for the button. I mean, that was my
That's
head as well.
the first idea that popped to my head when talking about this.
Yeah.
So
So now we have a create button, and then let's say I want to actually implement one example here. So should I
okay,
say like class? Can I
so
actually go ahead?
so you, yeah, no, it's okay. I'm just thinking whether we should pass something to the button, because maybe we need to pass a label, let's say. Otherwise, that would be a very hard coded button, you know.
Yeah, let's go. Label.
Cool. Yeah. So now, yeah, again, we just create. Now, when we implement this pattern, we should create a specific factory class for each platform we would use. So if we are using only Android and iOS, we would create two classes, one for like Android widgets factory, and the other would be, I don't know, Cupertino or iOS widgets factory. And
Uh-huh.
if we are using more platforms, then we create a dedicated classes for them as well.
Okay, like this one.
Yep, exactly.
And the
And
same thing, let's actually implement missing
mhm,
part. And then the same thing goes for like just again make it simple for two platform, but we
mhm,
know that we will and also maybe one more web.
cool. Okay. Don't know if that
Okay.
would be different, but if that's even the same, it's still a good thing to do, since later on, if when we need, let's say, the angry manager comes to your office and says, now I want this to look different on the web, and
Yeah,
instead of
yeah, sure.
like reworking your code, you could just simply go to this web widgets factory and change the code
Great.
in a single place, instead of
Okay,
refactoring
cool.
everything from the ground up.
Okay,
Cool. So
let's do something. Then here, should I just simply return like for now let's a text button or something like that? Is it what we want to do?
Uh, since this is iOS, we could return the Cupertino button. I guess that would make more sense over there.
Yeah. Cupertino.
I think Cupertino. Um,
Cupertino button.
yeah,
Yeah, here we go.
Cupertino, but yeah, and that
And
should
then
accept the on
I
pressed,
think
but we could leave this empty
probably we
for
should
now. Yeah,
also pass a callback here. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
let's say this is a function. Yeah, because these two parameters are
The meaning of the button, right?
yeah. Well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
they are also required, so that means we should.
Oh, so we must them. Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, here you go. So now I do have my function. Is it this class?
You could maybe change the the type, or you could do this.
Yeah, here you go. So and my child. Pretty
So in this
no.
case, that would be just text widget with the label inside that, right?
Yeah, text
No,
widget.
not widget, but just text uh, and
Yeah, sorry, text and
label
then
inside.
label, which
Mm-hmm.
is label. Here you go.
So
So
we
now
have
I
a
have
little bit
actually
on pressed. So I'm just
let's
thinking why we have that. Maybe it needs this fancy trick.
yeah,
I'm
we
not
could have done that as well, but yeah, sure. Yeah.
because when I'm passing those stuff, I'm usually using the type definitions that were introduced in
Yeah,
Dart
sure.
recently, like void callback or something like that, because that's just easier, you know. But the idea is the same. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, sure. Uh well, if you are telling that we need to show that, right? Type def is
No,
like
void callback actually comes together with the uh, void callback comes together inside the
there is volt okay, okay. Yeah, you're
yeah.
right.
And if
Here you go.
we can check this, I don't know if oh no, it's not
Let's check
open
it.
in your case, but
Yeah, here is actually the
basically
type.
yeah, basically how what is void callback is just a void of void function, and that's it. So instead
Exactly.
of passing the void function, we can just pass void callback,
Well, let's do
and
that.
everyone knows what we are doing there. So
That's much better. Good. So now let's move on to another implementation. Very quickly, we're gonna just return a text button, let's say. Just simple,
that
right?
should work. Sure.
That's a material one, and that's a text with label. And we should be now good to go. And for web, we keep it simple, same as material. All right. So
Hmm.
now I have three factory. What
Yep.
next?
So now, when we are opening your app, or when you are creating a specific widget, let's say
Let's say I
inside
have
your UI,
actually, yeah, I have an home page which has a button here.
cool.
This
That that's
button.
that
I actually
that
want to
sounds
change.
amazing.
Yeah, I just want to change this button to use that factory, and then
Mm-hmm.
render differently on different platforms.
Yep, yep. So, so since this is a stateful widget, right? That's a good start. So, do you see my cursor a little bit up? I'm like at the state home screen over there.
Yes.
So yeah, so what we can do with having the stateful widget, we could there create. Is this the null safe version of Dart? Oh, it is.
Yes.
I see
Yes.
those symbols. So we could do the late final. Um, how our factory is called widget factory, right? Widget factory, and that would be like factory.
Yeah.
And inside our init state method, uh, there we could do our magic. So if the default case, let's say that would be you should in the if statement you should check the current platform of your app is running. So if you are on Android, it would return the Android. If iOS, that would be iOS, and I guess that could be taken from Dart.io package, I would say.
Yeah.
But um, do you remember this piece of
Yeah.
code?
It's platforms. That's correct. But you just need to import it. But I have actually question here.
Mm-hmm.
So not this one. I isn't it better now because you want to say like platform.ios and if platform dot blah blah and then so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
right? and then return probably different um,
Yeah,
factory or
yeah, so if we note that this is iOS platform, even though this code is not what we need there, so in this case we would note that our factory is iOS widget factory,
yeah.
right? Then you note that I think switch statement would be better, but basically if the platform is Android, then we would note that our factory is Android widgets factory, and
Aha.
that's true. So we are creating a specific factory for the platform. So that was my intention when I mentioned that we should do this single time when we are like uh, at the beginning of our of starting our application, because we are just creating this factory once and then we pass it along our
I
along our
see.
widget tree. Yeah,
And
but
then once
but
they
it's
are
fine using there. Hmm.
okay, and then once actually let's do that quickly. Android widget factory, and once they are ready, then you're gonna go there, and here you just say factory.create button, right?
And that's it. And we just
And
pass our callback and we pass our label.
okay,
And based on the if we are running our app on Android, that would be the text button we created. If that would be iOS, that would be Cupertino button, and so on. So inside the code, inside the UI code, as you could notice, the UI code basically knows nothing about the specific implementation of this button. It knows that, okay, I need to use the button from the factory and that's it.
yeah, sure.
So, but all the hard work is done under the hood inside those factory classes, and that's the
Now I
beauty
have a
of that.
question here for you. So
Hmm.
if I do this here, that means I need to do this everywhere in different regions, and that's a little bit boring, right? So isn't it
That's
better,
too
right?
boring.
Isn't it better like I already have like a common widget, like a class here, which is actually doing something here. So isn't it better here that I move everything here in this class,
Yeah,
and then
yes,
just have one widget, let's say platform specific button widget, and then use that everywhere?
yeah, that should work since now our factory only does the creation of a button, so
Okay.
now it works for sure. But
Yes.
the abstract factory creates a family of related objects, so that would include buttons, that would include other UI
Cool.
components, and in this case, you won't be able to put this inside this reusable button. So basically, I think I had a code example somewhere, as I recall, during the Dartup conference in 2020. I was talking about design patterns there as well, and I implemented uh, a piece of code that actually introduced this, that we're using factory and we're initiating this factory during our startup and then just using this factory everywhere. And
Okay.
we know that it will be the same. So yeah.
Cool. Cool. This one was very, very nice. So it's very useful to see the, factory for creating widgets. I actually have a question right now. I
Hmm.
have seen in some application, or I have used that we are trying to sometimes simplify several different sources into one, and then use the only one interface to our presentation layer, for example.
Hmm.
And I think the name of the pattern is Facade or something like that.
Yeah.
I think
That
this is
that's
also very useful. Can we implement that?
Oh, sure. Just show the code place what you think we can wrap around the specific code
I'm not
there.
sure if I do have anything very um, very specific for that. But then, what if we just, let's say, as an example, I do have two services here, auth and
Mm-hmm.
chat. What
Okay.
if we create only one service only that combines both, like a facade pattern?
Cool.
Just as an
Okay.
example, I'm not sure it's a good pattern for this purpose, but just as
We'll
an
see.
example.
We'll see. We need to try and we'll find out, I think.
Yes.
Cool. So under services we could just create a facade service, or however we want to call that. I don't know.
Let's call it facade. Yeah, here. Facade dot start. I think it's with C, right?
Yeah, it's with C.
Okay. All right.
Yep, yep, facade. Okay, cool. So there we just so the pattern itself is very straightforward. I mean, it just that does not even require an interface by definition. You can just create a simple class there. So in our case, that would be enough, like class facade, and that's it.
Like facade service.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay.
Cool. And there, so the purpose of facade is just inside of it includes several different services. So the meaning of that is that the developer, for instance, you're creating that third-party package, or you're just a developer of, I know, some Dart package, the end user of this package does not really need to know what's going there under the hood. So technically, you could provide just a single endpoint. In our case, we're like trying to connect authentication at chat. So maybe they're exposing like send message, let's say, right?
Yeah.
But under the hood, you need for the user to be authenticated before that, and you need to use the chat service to actually send this message. So under the hood, those two services are used, but actually from the code, as a like a developer of a project, you would only see that, oh, we have the facade service, and we could just use this endpoint without knowing the specific details of that.
Sure.
So that's the benefit. And yeah, and what we need to do, so I think we can either we could create instances inside, or we could just pass those two services as parameters to our constructor using the injection. So both
Okay.
of
So
these
we
cases
can
should
like
work.
do like this way. Like for example, I can say this dot auth and this dot chat,
Yep.
and then I can definitely say auth and chat. Well, I can
Yeah.
definitely also say
Yeah,
this
need
is
need
auth.
types for those for sure.
This is also chat. Service.
Yep, so that's basically we
Okay.
inject these two over there,
Okay.
and
And
we
pretty
can
much actually it, right? For example,
that
here.
that that that's actually the implementation of Assad. Now it depends on our endpoints and what we need to expose. So in our case,
Exactly.
yeah, I can carry on. Let's say if we need to expose, as I mentioned, right, send message function over there. So yeah, so there we need to like authenticate user first, right? So we would do like if out returns that, I don't know, is authenticated. Let's say we have this method
Yeah, we do
over
have
there.
something else here. Let's actually do it actual.
Yeah,
We do
because I
have like
because I do not
um
see the code completion, so it's hard to guess. But maybe we have
yeah, here
something.
is we do have profile. Let's say if profile is not null, that
Cool.
means it's
Yeah, that means
authenticated.
that the user is not authenticated. So in this case, yeah, uh, if the user is
Then if
authenticated,
and then
then
we can
it's
say chat
chat.
and then chat dot like
Yeah,
let's
we can
say
connect
we do
user first, and then we can like
yeah,
send
for
the
example,
message.
connect user and and the user here in this case is profile, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
this is just example,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
but actually a correct example. Okay. All right.
So
So
yeah.
this is let's say actually we want to say connect user.
Oh, that yeah,
Yeah.
that even makes sense now. That's not
Yeah.
that's
So
not.
this is actually facade right now. So instead of me going and using two different services everywhere, so then
Mm-hmm.
I can only use this service, which is getting access to all of the other services. So and then
Yeah.
it does
So
everything there.
so inside your code, you just basically would have like instance of this facade service, right? Like service, which would be facade service. You'll create an instance somewhere or inject it, and
Yeah.
then just use service connect user to chat. and that's it. Uh, that's the usage instead of calling the out something, calling
Yeah, sure.
the chat something, and of course you need to be aware of this specific logic that the user is authenticated. Of course, our example is very straightforward there because that's just an example, but in real case there could be a lot of validation logic, a lot of like
Sure.
instead of two services there could be five or ten
But
even.
you said validation. Are you going to do the validation here in Facade? Because Facade should not take any business. Like it's just some
I
kind of connection.
I mean, technically, this is validation. We are validating that user is not null, but no, we will wrap this validation around. I mean, in other place. But yeah,
Sure.
I'm just wanted to mention that we do not need to know about the details how this is implemented. We're just using this inside our code, and that's it.
Good. All right. So we covered maybe 4 or 5 design patterns,
Hmm.
and we changed actually a couple of that. We implement a couple of that in my application. It's way less than 23 that you have written about for sure. But I have to admit that not all of those 23 are very useful for sure. I
No,
some
so
of
some of
them,
those are very rare. Like, I mean, okay, I'm developing for 5 and more years now. Like, that's the professional experience. I mean, working at the companies and so on. And some of these patterns are like looking crazy, and you have never noticed those in the code base.
exactly,
But they just exist, and maybe that's okay. I mean, in case you would get to the situation where you need to use those, at least you would know that you could use something instead of reinventing the
exactly.
wheel. So yeah, but I
Yes,
think what we covered is like those very popular ones, and even
yes,
very popular in Flutter, not in programming in general. So that's
exactly.
cool.
That's very cool. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation, coming and pair programming with me, showing me how I can use this design pattern in my application, and
Thank
being
you.
an
Thank
awesome
you.
partner for me for this show. I also encourage everyone that they go and check out Mangirdas' articles and follow him on different platforms. He has a YouTube channel. He has a Twitter account, LinkedIn, and different where. I put the link below. So he has very knowledgeable about the design pattern. So go ahead and read more about that. It's very nice to understand design patterns because you can simplify your code and make it more maintainable. So it's very good to go and learn if you don't know them. And if you have any question later, you can reach out to me or Mangridas. For sure, Mangridas first
Yeah,
about
I
design
have
pattern.
actually I receive a lot of questions in Twitter specifically because Twitter is quite open when you need to like directly mm, send a direct message to someone. So I receive quite a lot of those like, why are you doing this specifically in this article or that? So I'm open to this. It's very fun to discuss these things.
It is
So cool.
fun.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for contributing that to the community as well, Mangridas. You're an amazing guy and a very valuable asset for Flutter community. Thank you very much for being awesome, and thanks for everyone for watching us. See you next
Thank you
time.
guys. Bye bye. Have a nice one.